Hi, this is Guitarist Denis Taaffe, and I'm in my home studio, and I'd like to discuss the making of Modern Rock Guitar Volume 274, Auditory Signals. It's my 274th album, surprisingly enough. And for those who aren't familiar with my music, it's basically, I describe it as new age rock guitar with guitar loops done on the fly and improvised on the spot, recorded with no additional overdubs. What that means is I get a musical idea and I improvise off that idea into a track. And sometimes it works great, and other times you fall flat on your face. So, and basically what you hear on the track is exactly what I hear, in the studio. I don't add anything afterwards or anything like that. It's kind of a different approach to what most people are doing. Most people are accustomed to recording a track and practicing each part and knowing exactly when they're going to play this and play that. Okay, well, let's discuss how this album came about. Obviously, I had just gotten done recording Modern Rock Guitar Volume 273, which I was quite pleased with at the time, and I wasn't really motivated, to record another album after I just got done with one album. I just gotten done with Volume 273, so I kind of need time to listen to it and appreciate it and that kind of thing. However, and I didn't even feel like really playing guitar, as I recall. And this happens often, where I sometimes just don't feel like playing guitar, but once you get into it, you start, really liking it, and you've forgotten that you didn't really want to play. But in this case, what inspired me to create another album is kind of strange. When I watch TV in the evenings, whether it be the news or what have you, I often sit on my couch and, always have a guitar nearby. In this case, it was just a really cheapo little tiny guitar, little acoustic here, right there, and so I'm used to, just playing around, that kind of stuff. And surprisingly enough, I was messing around, and I thought, okay, well, here's standard tuning, and I usually don't change the tuning on guitar from standard tuning, but just to try something different, just for the heck of it, I thought, well, I'll change one string. So here we have a regular E, 5th fret, 2nd string A, 3rd string D. Okay, so we've got so that's standard tuning. And I thought, okay, well, what if I took this 3rd string and took it down 1 fret, right, from open D to C sharp. So let's do that right now. Okay, and this was, it's a little cheapo guitar, so it's not, anything fancy. It's just something to mess around with, when I'm watching TV. So here's what I came up with. Just on these bottom 3 strings, instead of the open tuning, I changed this one string down 1 fret, or 1 note, if you like. It's actually a half step from D to C sharp. So, and you end up with this. I thought, wow, that's kind of neat. E, A, C sharp. And so I messed around with that tuning, right? And it's on the bottom 3 strings. E, A, C sharp. Okay. And you can hear it makes kind of a chord when you strum it. And so I came up with this little riff, and it's very simple. But for people who are maybe listening, who are guitar players trying to figure out what that riff is, while it can be played on a standard tuning, it's a lot harder. So I came up with this riff right here. So, really, it's kind of the first of the 3 open strings. E, A, C sharp, instead of D. And then, just like an E minor chord, E, B, and that's actually I believe an E flat instead of E. But it's the same fingering as an E minor chord. 0 for tablature would be 0, 2, 2. And then 0, 2, 3. Which will be E, B, and then E. So put those together, and you've got and so while I was messing around with that, I came up with that little riff, and I thought, wow, kind of got me interested, and so it really inspired me to continue. And what I discovered, these are open strings. So what happens if I bar those 3 bottom strings at the 2nd fret, all 3, and you get, and then take it off to the open strings. So I have this then. turned out that with an electric guitar, with a pick, it's a lot more fun to play, of course, and the sound was very different. And I guess the more difficult part for me was to figure out, okay, well, what can you play over those top chords? Because now you've changed the tuning, right? So instead of an octave here, right, the fingering's changed. So I had to figure it out. And that really registered with me musically. I really very much like that riff. It's very much speaks to me, is a good way to describe it. And this ended up being the first track on volume 274 and inspired me, in fact, to record the rest of the album. Right. So, yeah, I always have a little guitar around just to mess around with, and you may hit upon an idea. And so, and we'll hear this in just a moment. Real quick, I just want to talk about the album cover for Auditory Signals. It wasn't exactly the title I was expecting. I mean, I tried some other ones, and they just, I don't know, it didn't seem to fit correctly. Obviously, it's a cobweb with drops of water on it, so I added a little guitar and likeness of me on it, and there you go, very real simple album cover. All right, well, let's get to the tracks. So number one, I ended up calling Guess Who, and the reason is, for me, just because I identify with that riff so much, I can instantly tell that it's me playing. So I called it Guess Who. So let's take a listen to it, and you'll hear that riff is the basis of the song, and then all I did to it really was just add, some notes on the top strings, the registered strings. And here's what I came up with. And it's called Guess Who. It's 5 minutes and 45 seconds long. Let's take a listen to that. Right here. So there's that, right, little riff. And then for a chorus, just those two chords, which hasn't come yet. Okay, there I added some double stops, octave double stops. Yeah. So I really like that riff for some reason. Okay. And there's the two chords there. Right? One is just one finger and the other is open. So it's a real simple riff. But together, it really worked. And I really enjoy it. So, of course, I started looping that and then adding swelled notes, harmonics, anything I could think of that would fit. I have to say it was more difficult than playing standard guitar, just because the fingerings were different. Not fingerings I was used to playing. Comes the chorus. Yeah, and then was all played with a pick instead of just, thumb. Okay, and let's fast forward that a little bit and see where it goes direction-wise when I add some things to it. So here we go, I add some pattern playing, which I then loop on the upper strings. And it creates a large ensemble based off that simple riff. Okay, so that really inspired me to keep recording, and this is how I came up with this album. So now let's go to track 2. It's called Trigger, which actually was the original name, and I believe, it's called Triggers, plural, but, alright, let's take a listen to that, and as I remember, that was more pattern playing type track. Here. Yeah. Definitely influenced by Tangerine Dream, of course. That's kind of similar playing. That you actually hear tracks they did on the soundtrack to Risky Business. That are somewhat similar to this. Getting ever closer, except this is all done on guitar rather than synthesizers. Yeah. And once I started looping that, then I'm also imitating bass on the guitar by lowering it an octave and looping that. So you can hear that both are going at the same time. Kind of fills it out, gives it a bigger sound than if it was just that guitar part. And then from there, it's a lot of fun just finding different patterns that work well, or different sounds, swelling, notes, those kinds of things. That's kind of the fun part, Okay, let's fast forward, because this is about 7 minutes long, so we'll go to 5 minutes here. Okay, there I've added some backwards guitar. Right here. Those are some swells. And what's interesting, as mentioned on earlier albums, I'm again using that Elise's quad reverb. And I think this is the last album that I'll be using the Elise's quad reverb. And I'll tell you why. While it's a lot of fun, or really fun to play with, I might try one other thing, and that is to hook it up to MIDI timing-wise, because right there it's just free-floating. So it's not synced to MIDI. But the other reason is I want to make sure that this adds a lot of reverb, and it kind of drowns out the individual notes a little bit. So I'm not sure I like that very much. So there's some pros and cons to it. We'll see. But in any case, so that's Trigger. Now let's go to track 3, which I ended up calling Full Moon Part 1. And it's actually part of a 14-minute track. But it's a 10-second mark for whatever reason. Either I made a mistake, or a note, as I recall, a note that was sustained a bit too long and got in the way of the other part, and as a result, sounded like a wrong note. You know, because it lasted too long. It should have been cut off earlier. So let's take a listen to that one. And let's see what I can tell you about this one. Ah, yes. Okay. There we go. There's a harmonic. Yeah. As I recall. Let's see. This is actually being inspired with the alternate tunings there. I just did a simple drop D. And actually, it may even be a drop C sharp. I'm not sure. Basically on the E string instead of E. Right, it goes down to D. Or it might even be C sharp. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly. And just gave it a different vibe, kind of a darker vibe, you know. And, well, because it's October and Halloween and, you know, horror movies and so on, I wanted kind of a dark vibe to these series of albums, at least during October. So, let's continue with that. And I found some chords, chord voicings, over that continuous drop D tuning. And you'll hear it here. A lot of them are kind of fills, you know, played off that drop D tuning. There's the voicings, yeah. Very much inspired kind of a John Carpenter film soundtrack, you know, inspired from that. Films like Christine back in the, you know, years ago. Rather similar. And there I've added that bass again, which is just guitar dropped an octave and rhythmic bass patterns, and you'll hear that come in. Yeah, so that's the main riff there. And right there. And that's the main riff. So let's fast forward, because it's a long track, and let's see where it takes me musically. Okay, so here I'm kind of building single note patterns off those chord voicings. That gives you an idea. Okay, let's move on to track 4. And track 4 was called Changes, Part 1. And it's 6 minutes, 54 seconds. So here I'm back in standard tuning, I believe. Let's try this one. Now this was kind of a fun track. Kind of a strange track too. Basically, I had some chord voicings that I had messed around with, and I thought, well, you know, I've been doing a lot of this droning bass thing, so let's try something where I'm droning the bass string for half the time and then changing the note. And I end up playing it's a G over C type chord. And that's, so it alternates between the kind of E type chords and this G over C. And the bass basically goes from E to C and back to E and so on. And this is what you end up with here, or at least I ended up with. Let's take a listen to that. So those are the E type strings, type voicings. Yeah. And the fingering doesn't change, just the position changes to get those different kinds of voicings happening. And there it is to C, and there's a C over a G. And then back to the E. It's musically a little something a little different than what I'd done in the past. And there's some pattern playing over it, of course, which I really like. I'll play it again. If you listen out of your left speaker, there's a little scratchiness. Let's see if we can do that again. Right there. And what that is either my volume knob, which is kind of scratchy. As I mentioned in previous album, I have to get that replaced because it is scratchy. Or it may also be, because I've got my pedal board here, and remember I've added that Elisa's Quadriverb, and unfortunately one of the cables for the left channel is right by the looping pedal board. So if I hit a pedal, I may have hit that cable inadvertently and caused that noise. But I went ahead and left it in there. It's a guitar noise, I guess. Okay. And so here I'm coming up with ideas that would work with it. Still plagued by that kind of scratchiness. In fact, I originally called it Scratch for that very reason. Okay. And now, track 5, which is Full Moon Part 2, which is really a continuation of track 3 that we heard, Full Moon Part 1. So it becomes Full Moon Part 2. And let's take a listen to that. Now notice, here, it's it's already been developed quite a bit because I've got some guitar parts. I've got those swelled parts that sound kind of like keyboards already looped. So here, this is a very similar type of atmosphere or mood, but more developed. And this is the kind of the fun part, adding notes that fit correctly, sound-wise. This is where I get to have fun with effects and presets and so on. Like there's a huge, right here, that sound is a huge reverb. Right? And when you swell a note, it just lasts for a very long time. There's the main riff again. So it still has the main riff, but I've added improvisations on top of that. Okay. So now let's move on. And this one's called Auditory Signals. Hence the title, right? Okay, here we go. Let's take a listen to that. And this one's kind of a long track. It's 8 minutes long. And this has a lot of pattern playing. Playing the bass, right, on the guitar, dropped one octave, and looping that on top of the pattern playing layer. And let's fast forward because it's 8 minutes long, and let's see how that develops. Right here. And that's where I got kind of a little frustrated with Elisa's quadriverb, because it was throwing the delayed pattern playing, right, that repeats, and it has to be a very strict rhythm, timing wise. It's kind of throwing that off a little bit, so it doesn't sound like it's synced correctly. So it was an attempt to, to use some of the different presets of the Elisa's, but I found that, as I said, it threw off the patterns a bit. There's some octaves. Here I'm looping a bunch of different notes and sounds to try to create a mood or atmosphere. Yeah, putting in some fills, that kind of thing. I should say it's not just hitting, any notes at all. It's figuring out, in your mind you're thinking, besides what you're hearing, what scales could I use here, what arpeggios could I use, and that kind of thing, and what can I do with them. For example, adding a fill or adding a series of swelled notes, that kind of thing. Okay, now, track 7, and we're almost done here, is Changes Part 2. Remember, we had a Part 1, and that was track 4, and that was the scratchy track. So the track kind of cleared up, the scratchiness cleared up, and it's a real short track, it's about 2:26. But this is the final ideas that developed from that track. So let's take a listen to that. Yeah, there's those chords. See, by this time, I'd figured out exactly what voicings I wanted to use there. Yeah. Before, it was just a vague idea. And if we fast forward a bit, I put in some other ideas here. Basically, this solidifies the main idea behind this track, that chord progression, if you like. Yeah. So, in the first one, it's kind of vague. You know, because they're basically building it up so it doesn't sound quite as solid as it does here. Okay, and now we've got one last track right here. And this is a real short track called Borders. And this is one just to end the album, really. It's real vague. Yeah. Okay, and here is basically using these chord voicings. I believe they're minor 7 flat 5s, and messing around with that a little bit. And it gives you this kind of mood that's kind of tiring, almost hungover type mood. Big chords, big sounding. And there, start looping it, and then putting in little notes that I thought might work. They're kind of silly. Just for fun. So there, that was just sliding into one note for fun. There's a little bend, but it works for me anyway. Yeah. Okay, so there you go. This is volume 274. Hard to believe. Very pleased with it. I think really a good album, and the inspiration came from that very first track, that riff. You know, by that time I felt like playing guitar, and was inspired even. You know, there are days where I play guitar and I'm not inspired at all, and usually what will happen on those days, when I play guitar, instead of improvising and recording things, I basically mess around with sounds, developing sounds, learning chords, practicing scales, arpeggios, working with different fingerings, that kind of thing. Learning, basically, and having fun, just playing. And then there are other days where it's more, I hate to say composing, it's more of, recording, playing, and improvising music. So there you go, this modern rock guitar, volume 274, Auditory Signals. And I really like the moods and atmospheres of it, you know, especially late at night, or you know, if you're driving and that kind of thing, you can play it in your car and forget about the madness going on around you. Okay, see you next time. Bye.